First, I want to describe that in former times I was more involved in speaking English, so I'm not sure if all will be so good as it could be. My personal involvement in the conflict to Yemen is I was a member of the European Parliament, as Dieter described, from 2004 to 2009. And I was the vice president and then acting president of the so-called Gulf State delegation. And that means all Gulf states, including Yemen. It was always interesting because the name was Gulf States, including Yemen. And I personally visited the last time Yemen in the year 2006. And as you know, 2006, it was the time of Mr. Saleh, the former president, which later on played a special role in the conflict and was killed. I met him, and I also met a lot of parliamentarians, because parliamentarian delegations have the main focus on meeting parliamentarians. And in this time, one of the debates was how to bring the state Yemen together, because before it was two parts, as you know. So now we have 2022, and we have a total other situation. Since a lot of years there is going on a civil war. And I'm a little bit happy that we discuss not always the same war, because in Germany in the moment there's one issue. There's one war, what is discussed, and it is necessary to discuss, and the involvement of Germany in this war. But it is something like all other things, all other wars are going behind the door. And so it's important also to have a look on the Yemen war. And I would call it a civil war with a big international participation. We have in the moment now a ceasefire. And I think it's a crucial moment for the conflict. What will happen? Is it possible to have this ceasefire as a possibility for negotiations, or is it something that the fights will go on the ground? Since 2014, the people in Yemen are suffering from this war, and to say it very clear, the United Nations say it's the greatest humanitarian catastrophe in our time. And that was something what I missed since now, that this should be described, that the situation in Yemen is terrible. And when you read the different reports from United Nations or other states, it's absolutely terrible for the situation for the people on the ground. For example, in one of the reports it's written that 80% of the population is directly involved in the conflict and in the war. And the normal economic situation in a lot of parts of Yemen are no more possible. And special, the situation of the children is terrible, and you have the situation that a lot have not enough food, and it's a situation when it's the description is it's the worst in the world. I think it's there are some other conflicts, you know. So we should focus also on this. Also, the so-called human rights situation is terrible. That means that the people have no possibility for political participation or something like this. It's very hard in this situation. When we go back, how this situation takes place, the Houthi rebels go in the capital of Sanaa, 2014, in military action, and the now former president, Mr. Houthi, in January 2015, called an international coalition to help, and then a coalition under the lead of Saudi Arabia started fighting against the Houthis, and this is the so-called Saudi-led coalition, and this coalition is supported from a lot of Western states, especially United States and United Kingdom, but also Germany. I will come to this later. And when we see the situation, it's so that on the ground, the Houthi coalition gets some, they have some, the land, they're winning some of the land. In the same situation it was that there are also some other actors, and I think this is important to know that especially in the south of Yemen, there are other groups which are described as terrorist groups, and some of them are acting of their own interests. Nevertheless, all this war could be described as a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's not that it's something like a puppy for Iran, the Houthis. It's a little bit more complicated, but it is clear that Iran supported them. And I would say when you see the situation, it's clear when you look to the geopolitical situation, this description of proxy war, I think, is the right description. And special Saudi Arabia has the interest that there is no other group from an Islamic understanding, from other Islamic understanding than in Saudi Arabia. As you know, it's a Wahhabite regime there. And what is interesting is that a lot of the states which have been involved in humanitarian help, together with the United Nations, go out. And as you know, there was this situation, the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Ankara. And to this situation, also Germany supported directly the Saudi coalition with with weapons. Since this time, there is a cut, and there is no more direct weapon spending to the Saudi coalition. What is important is that there are only a few countries still on the ground in Yemen, and I think it's good that the German government have decided not to go out. It's always on the ground, and it's also make development cooperation also in the situation of war, because especially then it's necessary. Some description of the humanitarian situation. We have 3.6 million internal displaced persons, and 24 million out of total of around 30.5 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. And I think this describes a little bit the situation. More than 20 million people do not have safe access to food, and 14.4 million people need immediate assistance to ensure their survival, and almost 1/3 million children suffer from a special situation that they have not enough food. So it's the poorhouse of the Arab world, because, you know, nearby there are very rich states. And also in the time as I was visiting Yemen, it was a very hard difference between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. I visited the border, I told before somebody, and it was a very high difference. Nevertheless, there are some voices of the civil society, very courageous, and they are try to make the situation public. We have some here. I'm happy that they are still working. As in my time as I visited Yemen, it was also possible to have some meetings with different groups. For me, very impressive, a group of women at the border to Saudi Arabia, and they described the situation that Saudi men in this time bought women and married them for some days and used them, and then they go away. It was a terrible situation, and they make public of this situation. So what will be next in the conflict? I think the solution is not so easy, because there are a lot of geopolitical interests and also local interests of the different groups. And nevertheless, it's necessary to have negotiations. And these negotiations could be the situation that it's now, because there is the ceasefire. And this should be used. I believe there should be, from the United Nations or other organizations, direct initiative to have negotiations. We will see when it will not work. Then my impression is that also the Houthi and also Saudi Arabia coalition will go on with this war, and I believe it's terrible for the people on the ground. I will describe a little bit what I'm a little bit involved in activities in the context of this Yemen war. There is a center, it's called European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights. And this European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights is looking for war crimes and the involvement of different European and Western states, especially Germany. And as I know, I was a former member of the Defense Committee of the German Parliament. They sent Eurofighters, Tornados, MK-80, that's our special bombs, which are used from the Saudi Arabian coalition, and there have been, together with human rights organization, it's called Mwatana in Yemen, and try to bring this to the International Criminal Court in December 2019. And it's still going on. Very interesting to read the 350-page criminal complaint, because I think it describes a little bit the situation on the ground. And the same organization has made a case on a court because in Ramstein in Germany they use this as a hub for a drone war, and it's one of the places special United States use their drones, so they use it through Ramstein. And the court, it was interesting, in March 2019 decided that the German government has to take action, that the United States respect the international law in using the Ramstein airbase. Nevertheless, we know there's still going on this drone attacks through the Ramstein airbase. And there's a special case. In August 2012, it was a man named Faisal bin Ali Yaba, and parts of his family have been killed. And he goes to the court, and then this decision was in this court. So I think the main message should be that there should be no support from the Western states for the attacks, which are special. Especially the civil society and the civil persons on the ground are this one who's suffering on this, and so this could be one point that the European or the Western or the German role could be on an end. And my impression when we speak about this war is that it's clear that different states have clear interests, clear geopolitical interests. And my experience in the parliament was that, especially when there was some state which are friends, then you don't speak about the human rights violations. And when it is an enemy, you speak about. And I think it's wrong, because it's necessary to describe the situation so that always when there is something against human rights, you should say it. And we have the situation that on the ground, both sides are clear are against human rights, and this should be also very clear be named. And as I said, now there is a ceasefire. In the media, they say the different parts of the conflicts are something like we don't want to continue the war. I hope this is right, and we should make pressure that the ceasefire will be to an agreement on the ground that the war ends, because especially the civil parts are suffering of this war. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we have lots of time. We had two politicians that kind of talked short. That never happens in real life. We just saw it happening. Normally they take way more time. Anyhow, that means we have more time for discussion. Also, you can also obviously discuss between each other if you heard any points earlier made. So is there anybody who wants to say something? Yes. Okay, I'm going to start, Tabea. I'm going to start with women because actually in our party, we always let women talk first.
You see?
We are fighting for equality.
Thank you. So I'm Tabea Hoffmann. I'm German. And I totally share your opinion. I always loved DDM's classes because of that. So I actually didn't know that the German government was involved in the Yemen negotiations at all, besides supporting the Saudi coalition. So as you already said, we stepped back from that. So rather like a critical question, what are then our German interests now in these negotiations? Because I don't think that solving the humanitarian crisis is our... Yeah, that's like... Can you like state all of them, maybe these interests? Is it also securing new natural resources, or because we have strong partners and relations in the region, so why Yemen now?
Yeah. Ich sammle.
Okay, so his preference is me collecting the questions. So this is a diplomatic way, so you don't have to answer everything, right? So you just collect the questions and then you go.
Ich bin Al Said, der Vorsitzende der Verein für einen neuen Jemen hier in Berlin. Darf ich in Deutsch reden?
Gerne.
Weil ich kann nicht so gut Englisch. Warum? Ach so. Es ist kurze Frage an ihm auf Deutsch. Ja. Man redet ganz selten hier in den Medien in Deutschland über das, was im Jemen passiert ist. Und wenn man darüber redet, dann redet man von der Sicht, dass Saudi-Arabien Jemen angreift, obwohl das nicht stimmt. Weil wir Jemeniten wissen, was wir gelitten haben, bevor Saudi-Arabien in den Jemen oder in den Krieg teilgenommen hat, weil Hadi die verlangt hat. Warum verbindet man das immer, wenn man von dem Krieg im Jemen redet, verbindet das sofort mit Saudi-Arabien? Wir haben ein Problem im Jemen, was von den Houthis verursacht wurde, worunter wir gelitten haben. Jahrelang wurden die Jemeniten getötet, wurden die Jemeniten ins Gefängnis geschickt, Häuser wurden in die Luft gesprungen von den Houthi-Milizen. Was haben die Medien hier in Europa gezeigt? Der Krieg wird leider vergessen in den Jemen. Und ich hoffe, dass der Parlament auch die Houthis als Terroristen nennt und bezeichnet, so wie die anderen Parlamente der Welt, die sie auch schon als Terroristengruppe bezeichnet haben. Vielen Dank.
So I do a quick translation. I'm just going to summarize it, and if it's wrong, just catch me and be like, no, this was wrong. So he's asking why Saudi Arabia in German media is always portrayed as attacking Yemen, because he says, in our experience, coming from the Yemen point of view, right, there has been problems before, there has been bombing, there has been war before, so why is it that this narrative of Saudi Arabia attacking is always present in German media? He doesn't look unhappy, but no. Okay, so there was another question. So I'm going to collect 3, okay, and then you can decide which one you answer, I guess.
Thank you. To me, it's unclear what side or position Germany takes. Does Germany fully support the Saudi-led coalition, given the many crimes they have committed against the Yemeni civilians? I mean, there is a notion of support to Saudi Arabia by the West, yet there are concerns and maybe an ideological conflict between Saudi Arabia and the West. Is Saudi Arabia a friend or is it an ally? How do you classify Saudi Arabia?
Okay, so Tobias, you start and then we can go for a next round.
The last question, I will start with the last question. It's a little bit difficult because the member of the parliament who is part of the government could answer this question to you easier because in my opinion, this government has Saudi Arabia as an ally, and they send weapons and they support what the Saudi Arabia coalition is doing. Nevertheless, you have I think it's something like a special German position, what is in a lot of conflicts. You have also the situation that Germany is one of the states who is still on the ground with development projects. And when I'm looking all over the world, I'm seeing a lot that Germany is doing something like this double, you would say when you have a conversation, double binding. It's different messages which are done. But this is clear, and this is a little bit a reaction to what you have said. I believe that I would not say that it is only the description as you has described, that because when Saudi Arabia is involved, it is in the medias, but for example, it's absolutely clear when there is a direct involvement of the government, this is something what is discussed. And you have the former government has decided to send no more weapons to states which are involved in the Yemen war. The funny thing was they have decided this, but at the end they have done it nevertheless. But they have decided in the former coalition agreement, and in my impression, it's always when there is an involvement of the government, then it is something what is special in the media. It's not because, for example, when you make an analysis of the situation, I would say, as I have said before, there is a clear acting against human rights of both sides. But it's not so easy. It's not, as you know, it's not both two sides. It's a little bit more complicated, especially in the south, that there are always other groups are involved. In my impression, it's something like when there is an involvement of the German government that the media are special looking on this. It's easy when you see which governments call other groups terrorists. It's always they call them terrorists when they are totally against their interests. For example, Turkey. They say now in the negotiations about the NATO membership, PKK and IPG are terrorists. Nevertheless, IPG was this group who fights against IS and was successful. And it was supported from the United States, for example. And so Turkey say they are terrorists, and the others say no, they are not terrorists. So it's something very easy to give something a stamp, they are terrorists. I think it's, for serious analysis is necessary to look what are they handling, what they are doing on the ground. And then you can make, they do this and this against human rights, they do this and this and in their fighting and so on. And in this, my analysis is clear. There are the Houthis on the ground which are have direct violence of human rights, and there's also the Saudi Arabian coalition, which are with their bombing and with their form of war, which are also against human rights. And so I think that when you have this analysis, it's serious because it's not looking away when somebody who is on your side does something what is not what should they do. So in my opinion, when I'm living here in Germany, I should care about the involvement. What is this government doing, the German government? And that's the reason, for example, why I'm focusing on the supporting of the bombing of the Saudi coalition, because this is war crimes, and the German government supports these war crimes, and I'm criticizing this. Nevertheless, I'm make the analysis of the situation on the ground. It's clear what I have described. I hope you understand my view. Your question?
What are German interests?
What are the direct German interests? In a lot of conflicts, my impression is that Germany's interest is to be part of the game. For example, I take in conflict Mali. You look on this and you see, for example, France has direct economic interests, but Germany want to be part of the game. And in this case, I believe it's also something like this. And it's something like the description of what is terrorism. And to say it very clear, that's a question of definition. And as you said, for me, some of the states make terrorist policy. And you said Turkey. I think when I seeing what they are doing in Syria, that's true. So the interest in a lot of parts, it's not so that you can say there are some always saying there's a direct economic interest. I think yes, in this conflict there is a part which is also clear economic interest, because as you know, Saudi Arabia is one of the states which give a lot of the oil, and so there is an involvement, and there also is this part of that there is a direct economic interest, and also that when we look to the conflict, that Saudi Arabia as a regime is one of the worst we have in the world. And I've been there. I don't believe that a lot of people have been in Saudi Arabia, and what they have on death penalty, for example, it's terrible high and all this. But it is supported because it is one of the main suppliers in the part of oil industry.
So thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the audience so far. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I have to.
Yes.
I just heard we are running late, and I was like totally under a different impression. So it's all blame on me, please, for the timing. That's okay.
Let's express our gratitude once again.
We are.